personal responsibility and nothing more. So, you can have an experience, I think, of anything at any level. It's not wishing things away or deciding that they don't exist. The guides would actually say, if you can see or know the presence of the divine in whatever you see is actually altered and changed by that knowing. That's vibrational accord. That's how things are lifted. So the one who lifts to the upper room has to be there. You can't lift something to the 10th floor from the basement. You have to get there and then lift it to you. And this isn't done through strength of will. It's done through alignment.
Absolutely.
So the aspect of self that operates in the higher level by nature of presence is already lifting, because that's the teaching of co-resonance.
Yes.
I hope that makes sense.
You got to accentuate the positive. Wow, I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
If you feel like that's what you want to do.
Hello and welcome to another show, Accentuating the Positive with Karen Swain. As always, wonderful to be with you again. Well, look who's in the house. It's Paul Selig. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you for having me.
Paul and I chatted 5 years ago when you were still teaching. You were still teaching at university, and you were undecided about whether you would leave your job and become a full-time spiritual communicator, teacher, whatever label you want to put, channel. Anyway, we'll go into that. Let me read out your bio for people that don't know who you are, and I'm sure that most people watching my show does. I know that my little tribe, we have big friends or fans there who love your work. So Paul Selig is an author and a medium or a spiritual channel, is considered to be one of the foremost spiritual channels working today. Born in New York City, Paul received his master's degree from Yale. A spiritual experience in 1987 left him clairvoyant. We discussed that in the show we did 5 years ago, if people want to hear more about Paul's awakening story. As a way to gain a context for what he was beginning to experience, he studied a form of energy healing and began to hear for his clients. Described as a medium for the living, Paul has the unique ability to step into and become the people his clients ask about, often taking on their personality and physical characteristics. He hears them telepathically. In his breakthrough work of channeled literature, and we're going to go through the books because you've been busy. I Am the Word is the first book. The Book of Love and Creation, second book. The Book of Knowing and Worth. The Book of Mastery. The Book of Truth. The Book of Freedom. And his latest book, Beyond the Known Realization, Paul has recorded an extraordinary program for personal and planetary evolution as humankind awakens to its own divine, multidimensional nature. Paul offers channeled workshops internationally and serves on the faculty of the Omega Institute, the Kripalu Center. How do you say that? Kripalu Center? Oh, where's that?
That is in the Berkshires in Massachusetts in the U.S.
Oh, lovely. I haven't heard about that one. The Esalen Institute, I've heard about those ones. Also a noted educator, he served on the faculty of NYU for over 25 years. He directed the MFA in Creative Writing program at the Goddard College for many years, and he now serves on the College Board of Trustees. You're busy. How do you get all that in as well as traveling the world channeling?
I don't have a personal life. It's pretty simple. There's nothing there. So why not?
Oh, darling one. Well, let me ask you, how have you been? We had this scheduled for, I don't know, a few weeks ago. And you were evacuated from Costa Rica, right?
Pretty much, yeah. I live in New York City, and I was doing an event, which now is my last sort of live event in Costa Rica. And while I was there, New York City shut down. And then I thought I might stay in Costa Rica, and then the State Department started evacuating U.S. citizens, telling them to get out of the country. So I could have stayed, but I actually found a friend who found me a little cabin to stay in Maui. And so I came to Maui. So I left to go to New York for 1 week with one suitcase. My dog is in somebody else's care. I actually moved apartments while I was in Maui in New York. So my whole life has been turned upside down, but so many people's right now. So I don't have much to complain about, truthfully. I'm in a lovely place with friends nearby. And, but yeah, I got bounced out of Maui. I mean, bounced out of Costa Rica.
Well, I have to say you look well. I think you look well. I think Maui's.
Thank you.
I think Maui's been kind to you.
I think it has too.
Yeah,
It's a special place.
it must be a different vibe. As an empath, it must be so different to New York City.
It is.
Let me ask you this: as someone who is as sensitive as you,
Mhm.
how do you? Because I get a lot of empaths, complaining about being empaths, and I think to myself, it's such a gift to be an empath. Don't make it your curse. How do you, as a sensitive, live inside a big, crazy city like New York City?
Well, I was born in New York City, so it's always been home for me. It's what I know. And, as a result of, being a native New Yorker, I lived in Massachusetts, for junior high and high school, but, I never learned to drive. I barely know how to cook. New York is great if you don't know how to drive and you don't know how to cook. And you can walk everywhere because you can get anywhere within an hour or so, on foot on the island. And I'm used to it. And this is actually the longest, I think, that I've been in one locale, without traveling someplace, where I haven't been showing up someplace to channel. And I have to say, I'm feeling the difference. It's remarkable. I sleep better here than I've slept in 10, 20 years. And I'm finding that it's less fraught. I mean, I'm on an island 6 hours time difference from all of my friends. So I get up and they're finishing their day and it's quiet, and I'm getting a lot less of sort of the psychic hubbub than I'm used to. But I love New York, it's what I know. And it's kept it real for me. It's not a very new agey place, and I'm not a very good new ager. I never have been. But I'm a good New Yorker. So.
Now, what do you mean by that? Now, what is a new ager? Look, I'm a city slicker too, born and raised in Sydney, but I'm definitely a new ager.
Well, I don't mean it to be a disparaging remark at all. It's just, I've never been very airy-fairy, and I've always had my own skepticism around things. And I lose patience at times, I think, when everything sort of, gets termed into, I don't know, rainbows and unicorns, and a happy meme. At times, there are real challenges and there are real growths. And, there's been talk in the last few years around spiritual bypassing, and I understand that. I do think that it's nice to say, well, he created his poverty and it's not my problem. Well, it is your problem, in my opinion. I think we are our brother's keepers. And I think that there can at times be a sort of self-indulgence that comes with this kind of culture, which I think we're growing out of, I have to say. I see great things with the young people who seem to be waking up, and are much more focused on community and things like that. When I was coming into this stuff, I told this story recently the other day, I was very broke. It was a year out of graduate school. I was newly sober, I think. I had no money at all, and I got invited to some sort of new age talk at somebody's essentially penthouse. I mean, it was this, everybody, people were wearing $1,000 crystals, everybody was wearing white. And I, this is the late 1980s, early 90s, so it was a time. And I remember walking into this place and realizing that you had to take your shoes off, and I had holes in my socks. I couldn't afford them, and being terrified and sort of sitting there miserably for, an hour. And, I was just sort of thinking, and I was in this really gritty place, like spirituality, this is hard, this is work, you got to do this to stay alive. And people were saying, oh, I watered the jade plant today and it talked back to me. And I'm going, you people make me crazy. And I never quite left some of that, and I enjoy it. I'm grateful for the people who have found my work, but my work, the work that comes through me, isn't just sort of the feel good, get what you want variety. It really requires a lot of accountability. I'm not always up to it, God knows. I wish it were easier. I wish it were, sillier and, happier. But I have no say in what's delivered through me by way of the books. I mean, I'm a channel, I'm a radio. I don't get to decide the content. I can question the content, which I often do, but it's not for me to decide what they're going to talk about. And rarely does it confirm what I want to hear. I want to hear that I'm done. There's no more work. I get to go marry somebody and, stay in Maui and
stay in Maui and sit on the beach, drinking cocktails.
Nothing ever gets exactly right. Well, maybe a coconut water, but yeah.
Well, it does require a lot of accountability. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. But I was just, Sarah sent me the book, the latest book, and I never got around to reading it except for this morning. I'm putting on makeup, listening to the computer read it to me. And it just, seriously, Paul, my heart just sings when I hear the words that come through you. It just sings. It just sings with, it makes me want to cry. It just sings with remembrance. It just sings with acknowledgement. It just sings with reaffirm. It's like, I don't think that we can teach anybody anything. I think that we just remind people of who we are, and it just sings with that remembrance. And when you stop identifying with the personality and all the foibles of the personality, and you can see him or her as this character in your play, and just like the script writer writes the character and adores this character with all its problems, I don't know, it can be a really joyous, fun ride when you're you've got that detachment from that character being who you are. And this is what your work says, Yeah,
it does, yeah.
But I know what you mean. Look, I live in an affluent part of Sydney, and I went to a friend's kirtan meditation meeting, and then there was this beautiful young blonde girl that said, would you like to come to puja this afternoon? And I said, oh yeah, that'd be nice, I'll come. And she gives me this address, and I turn up to this house, and it's like this $25 million house on Sydney Harbour. It's like ultra, ultra, ultra modern, massive mansion. And we're on this huge balcony overlooking Sydney Harbour doing puja. Do you know what puja is?
I don't.
They have this little fire. It's this Hindu thing, and some teacher sits there and chants and then burns and then chants and burns and chants and burns, and it's long, but it's kind of like burning away. I don't know what it burns away, but it burns away density, distortion. I don't know, but here I am in this absolute luxury doing puja. It's so funny. It's just so funny. It was so unexpected. I didn't sort of when someone said come and do puja. But yes, spiritual work can be done in all walks of life, I suspect. And
it has to be, really. I mean, there's different lessons from everything. I got to learn the lessons of being broke when I was in my late 20s. And
yeah, me too.
Now I have different lessons, and I'm grateful for these, but they carry with it their own teachings. The guides I work with remind us all the time that our life is our teacher, and the day is where the lessons come. And if I can remember that, I can have a pretty great experience with it all. I'm understanding what I'm accountable to and that I have the opportunity to learn. But, it's all learning. This is school. That's what they say. This is school. We come here for that. Okay. We're here. Might as well learn.
Well, now there's a question right there. I've got a million questions written down because I've asked my little tribe to ask you questions, because as I was saying to you before the recording, on my online tribe, I have some of your students who are big, admirers of your work, and I asked them, do you have any questions for Paul? But this is one of the questions that someone asked me when my guides in the little tribe, is Earth a school? And my guides had said, of types, but if you are of infinite intelligence, there is nothing to learn.
Yeah.
So why would we come to Earth to learn. So,
well, I think we come to remember, but I do think that we learn through our experience. And, you know, we come here and we're sort of enmeshed in personality, and we're in this, the guides call it an octave that has been heavily invested with fear.
yeah,
And, you know, their teaching is to move us beyond that, to lift us beyond that to a level of resonance where we're no longer, you know, activated by that and calling those lessons to us. It doesn't mean that the things don't happen. I think it does mean that how we respond to our lives is transformed in some ways. So, I mean, I'm an old teacher. You know, I was a college teacher for years. Education is a construct that I know and that I'm comfortable to. But the guides have said, you know, if everything is an opportunity to learn, then we're no longer victimized by our circumstances. They become opportunities. And it becomes a way to frame experience and to move through them. And the guides have said you can't be a victim and a master at the same time. You know, we get to choose. And so I find that if I can sort of reframe things in my own experience as opportunity, I'm much less frightened than I normally would be. And I move through things with grace, and I actually acquire knowledge, or I align to my knowledge. Perhaps knowledge isn't even acquired. But I don't, when I say it's school, I don't think it's about learning techniques. I mean, it's nice to, you know, if you want to learn how to bake a cake, it's good to have a recipe. You know, I don't know how to bake a cake. Somebody else gets to do that and learn that lesson. But, you know, when I began doing the work that I do now, there was a very long learning curve. I don't think it's over. I don't think that I'm, you know, how I work has continued to shift as I've grown into it and acclimated to the energies. You know, it has to be. When I first started, I was just fairly astonished and also horrified at this phenomena, because I wasn't expecting to channel, and I wasn't even somebody that necessarily put any credence in it. You know, I thought it was a curiosity, but it wasn't what I aspired to at all. I had just studied a form of energy healing and wanted to hold a little group in my apartment to sit in the energy. And the moment I did, I began to get instruction. And I wasn't lecturing. The lecturing didn't start through me until 2008, which is the year I quit smoking. You know, I started opening up psychically when I quit drinking when I was 25. And whatever I was in 2008, once the 4 packs a day of cigarettes were out of my system, they began to lecture nonstop, and they haven't stopped. You know,
yeah.
I mean, my system couldn't be worked with, I think, at the level it is now.
Yeah, I've got so much to say to that. So claiming the work. Okay, so this is my experience too. I've got the mob. I call them the mob, right? You call them the guides. I call them the mob. I gave them a prettier name, Blissful Beings, because I had a business called Blissful Beings when I used to massage. And then I kept asking them who they were. Like, what's your name? What's your name? They never gave me a name, right? And they just said one day, well, who do you think Blissful Beings are? And I went, oh. Anyway, but I call them the mob. You know, claiming that, because having them constantly teaching and constantly talking and claiming that that's happening is a real lesson in ego and stepping out. This is the conversation we had 5 years ago, right? So you're working as a teacher, you're really comfortable, you're loving what you do. And now the books are channeling through you. 3 were done by then, right?
I see,
and the guides were really asking you to step into who Paul Selig is now and be that full-time messenger and teacher. And you were kind of undecided about it at that point. And but claiming that, and this is a lot of the people that are attracted to my work, they are I call them the New World teachers, you know, taking on that role as someone who teaches or channels or has a message for humanity without having a PhD in channeling. Do you know what I mean? What would you say to these people that are?
Well, people sometimes ask me, or they say that they want to be a channel, and I often say, why would you want to do this? It's never gotten me a date, really, and it's well, no, it's just what it is. But what I want to say is, it's truly, I think I'm of the opinion, and some differ, I make a distinction between inspiration and channeling. I think that they're 2 different things. And I think inspiration is very high, but channeling in its truest sense is taking dictation.
Yeah.
It's not convenient. It's not, I'll just leave it at that. And so, the court stenographer, in some ways, if you take a moment to look at him or her, is in some ways the least glamorous or least interesting person in the court. They're rendering the information. And I'm very clear that my job is to show up and be the radio. When I work psychically, which I do in my workshops as well, and I tune into people, I mean, that's a little more, I'm more invested in that only because I'm interpreting when I read. There's a level of interpretation. It's called reading. And that's kind of fun for me. Channeling isn't fun. It's not bad. I enjoy it. But it's this really astonishing experience of being in the moment with transmission. And I don't know if that's what your experience is, but when I'm not channeling, I don't think about it. I can tune into the guides if I want to about an issue. But when I'm channeling, I hear one phrase repeated incessantly in my head. And it's going to keep repeating until I give it language. And even if it makes no sense to me, but once I say it, then everything else tumbles out and they just keep talking and talking and talking until they say, stop now, please, which means it's the end of the lecture and I get to have a sip of water. So for people that want this, I believe this firmly. If you want it, ask for it. If you want to evolve spiritually, ask. You'll be met. So they're saying, say this. I don't always tell this story, but when I was maybe 32 years old or so, and I was studying with my old teacher, who was a healer. She's a very interesting woman. And she said in a workshop, okay, everybody, I'm going to give you a little prayer, and you're going to have to write this one down. Write down what you want, but be very careful how you phrase it because you're going to get it. And I, of course, in retrospect, I said, I should have asked for a great apartment. I should have asked for a raise. I didn't ask for, I just said, I thought about it. I don't know how I wrote it on the page. I'd lost the page. But I did say, I want to go all the way with God. That's what I said, And I'd had a couple of experiences prior to that had given me the awareness of another level of consciousness or the presence of source that was astonishing to me, and I could never forget it. I knew it was there. I just didn't know how to live there, or if I even could. So that's what I asked for. And sometimes I think, and the guides have said to me, well, Paul, you asked for this. I mean, they've also said that I agreed to this before I came here, but I did ask.
That's it. Yeah.
And we have to ask.
There's a few things I want to say to that. And, I've been wanting to say this to you for 5 years, actually. I've heard you say, I'm just the radio, I'm just the receiver. It's like the just. And I want to say something to you. So I've been showcasing New World teachers for like 25 years, and I've seen so many come through, first through the Academy of Light every Monday night, and now on media for like 11 years. And I've seen so many people come through, and what I notice about you, like your mob, the same mob as my mob, same mob as, Francis's mob, same group, same guides. But the information comes through Paul. It comes through the filter of Paul. It comes through the education of Paul. Paul, who spent his life exploring the literature and script writing and all those beautiful things, and has this amazing brain that has this language that other people don't have. And so there is just such, what's the word I'm looking for? The way the information is delivered through Paul's brain is so beautiful. The way the combination of words that are put together, the words that are used to explain a concept, that is so delicious. And that, honey, is all you. Yes, the information comes, the same information that comes through many, but it comes through you. And so that is your part in this. And that's you're not just the radio or the receiver, you are the mind through which the energy is translated.
Yes, I agree with some of that, what you're saying. I don't agree with all of it, because they actually have a better vocabulary than I do.
Well, they do.
And I actually have to look up words occasionally, because I'll say, it just happened 2 weeks ago. We couldn't figure out, the word was presence, and the transcript is this presence? And the word was prescience, which is a different word, which I've never used in a sentence in
Right.
my life. But
Yes.
it was very clear what it was. But they do co-opt my vocabulary. They do co-opt memory. They do co-opt my worries and concerns because they'll often address them. So I do believe that I'm a collaborator and an essential one to this experience. I don't underestimate that. What I do want to avoid at all cost is people projecting onto me things that are not me. You know, I'm a guy who's got his own issues and is working through his own stuff and is doing his best and is on the path just like every other schmuck on the road. I may have been, you know, a little bit longer, but I'm grateful for this. I'm actually grateful. It puts it in perspective. And I really do think that if I ever start showing up and saying, hi, I'm Paul, I'm the channel, capital T, capital C, I would go, if anybody were to do that, I would say, go listen to somebody else, because it's not about self-abnegation. It's not about denying abilities. Somebody who plays the violin beautifully has developed a level of skill, but may have the natural makeup. Somebody once asked me if they would be able to do, if they could just do what I did. And I struggled with it because I do believe that there is a level of skill that's developed, and I don't know how people like you or I are wired at a certain point. I feel like I got rewired to do this, to be able to bring this transmission through, and that it didn't happen overnight. And, you know, I said, you know, anybody can play basketball. I can play basketball, but I'm not, you know, 6'3", and I'm never going to make the team. Do you know what I mean? I'm not, I don't have the equipment to deliver that, but I do have the equipment, and I've been developed over the years to do this. And some of that was having been a classroom teacher. You know, when I was a playwright, when I was younger, I had no idea what I was doing. I was inducing trance before I worked. I would put one piece of music on a loop for hours and just sit there and see what came through.
Yeah.
And so the idea, and when I started stepping into other people, and for the first time it happened, I was astonished. But somebody said, you know, mention their father, and I had my eyes closed, and I said his name, and the woman gasped. She said, "Oh my God, you look just like him all of a sudden." Yeah. And I found I could do it every time. But that idea of becoming other people wasn't foreign to me. You know, it had been part of my artistic work. What I didn't know was that I could do it with a living, and what I didn't know is I could close my eyes and have whatever these guides are, you know, dictate whole books that don't need any editing. For me, that was the proof of the whole thing. You know, I don't get to go back and change things. I think we changed 3 words in the last book. Or in this last lecture, presence became prescience, because it was clearly the intended word. I just didn't know what the word is, you know. Yeah. It came out muddled.
Well, look, I was having this conversation before we started this morning with my mom. This very conversation was going over in my head. And I said, you know, this you said, because I heard you say this morning, but there are words that I don't know what they mean, so I know it's not me. I've heard that sentence I heard this morning. Yeah. And I had that similar experience recently. Remember the young man I was telling you about has this space that wants to see you come to Australia. So I was in his space recently, and we were doing some meditating and stuff. And it's right in the city, right next to Central Station. And these Aboriginal guides came in. And they said, thank you for what you're doing. We want to bring Aboriginal law back into the city. And then they spelt it for me, L-O-R-E. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, what does that mean? And so I had to go home and Google L-O-R-E. So, and then they said to me, but you've heard the word, you've seen it, you've heard it. So the fact that you've seen it and heard it enabled you to receive that information. And
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you. But I think that there's a reason that I'm not doing, and it's happened once in a while. I can always say I don't do medical readings, you know. And once in a while, the guides will come through and say left ventricle, and I don't even know what the ventricle is or what the left or right does. And the person will say, yes, that's exactly where the issue is. And I'll go, okay. But I'm not I feel that, at least in my case, the work that comes through me is rather singular. You know, one of my earbuds is rather singular. You know, it's sort of coming out to bring these books through, and I'm happy to do it. And the other stuff I do is fine. And I know that I have a level of ability. I don't deny that, you know, and I'm grateful for it, really grateful for it. It's providing me a living, and it's giving me work that's meaningful, and I'm learning through it. And, you know, now that I finally had the courage to leave academia, and that really was like pulling teeth, I know that it was the right decision. But at the time, you know, I was in my 50s and walking away from, you know, retirement, insurance, all of those things, a steady paycheck, you know, a sense of identity in the world that was a lot more comfortable for most people. I remember once in a while, I would meet somebody and they would say, well, what do you do for a living? I'd say, well, I work as a psychic and a college teacher. And they say, oh, what do you teach? As if psychic had been, that was just a blip on the screen. You got rid of it. And I don't care anymore, which is the good news. You know, I don't care that people judge this or what I do or what you do. I'm fine with that. I've had to get those lessons. I just know that, you know, I'm not trying to trick anybody. I just show up as best I can for the work that's in front of me. And I look at it now. And this helped me enormously. I look at it as my job. It's my job to show up. And I am one of those people that doesn't think that some jobs are more important than others. I mean, right now in the pandemic, we're seeing the value of the grocery store worker, you know, in a way that we never have before. And, you know, suddenly the entertainment lawyer doesn't mean that much. Do you know what I mean? He's not essential.
Or the football move, the star, you know, the $1 million.
Exactly. All the celebrity stuff is going out the window. And I think that that's really great, you know, and it's not to make those other people, you know, less valuable. I mean, they're compensated well, but I think that we've lived in a culture that's been a little bit skewered. So, you know, I don't know. So if it's my job, I can show up, I can have done a good job, and I can feel good about the job that I did. And that's great for me.
Well, watching your journey, having watched many people's journeys over the years, you've been really successful and the work has really spread and, you know, it's been really popular. And this is astounding because the level of the frequency, the level of the work is, I don't want to use hierarchy, but is not everyone's cup of tea. Let me put it that way. And yet you've been on mainstream media, you know, a spiritual channel, like you've been on, I don't know, some mainstream media shows. You've been on Gaia TV, and you've obviously in Bill, my friend Bill's movie, and PGS, or are you in the next one, Fear?
I'm in both of them. And I was on Nightline. I did a lot of these, you know.
Nightline? How'd you get on Nightline?
Somebody came for a reading, or the woman I was working with sent somebody for a reading to check me out, and I nailed it. And I think I started to look, she asked about her husband, and I started to resemble him, and I actually relayed their inner dialogue in their marriage, I think, in a way that was helpful and moving and supportive and she went, okay, you know, let's do this. Let's just do this. And it was a good experience. They didn't focus on the channeling, though. They focused on the psychic ability because that was more palatable, you know, for mainstream media. I agree. I feel like I've been very fortunate here. But I have to say, there's, you know, I'm very good at showing up. I'm extremely consistent. You know, I show up even when I don't want to. I've had to show up and channel, you know, hours after putting my dog to sleep, who was my dearest companion. I've had to show up and channel after I just had a fight with somebody and I've been crying, you know, and I do it and I learn through it. And at that level, I acknowledge that I've done the footwork. I also acknowledge the fact that I was prepared for 18 years of doing a group with 3 to 10 people and people putting $10 in a basket, you know, and that was in some ways, my apprenticeship. And I would, you know, frankly, and this is the interesting thing. If, you know, if for some reason I showed up and there were only 3 people in the workshop, again, I would still show up. You know, I'm appreciative that we get big groups now and there's interest in the work. I agree it's not for everybody, or needn't be for everybody. And why should it be? So I have to say this because it's important. This is also the one area of my life that really has been surrendered.
Yeah.
You know, I just show up and the right people have shown up to support me every step of the way. And I'm
Absolutely.
very grateful for that. You
Mm.
know, and when I meet people who are trying to get a career, I tend to want to say, don't try to get a career, show up and do the work.
Yes.
Do the work, just do the work. And if the work is of value, people will come, you know. And I'm concerned sometimes, you know, that we live in a culture where people want to put up a shingle right away. You know, I took a workshop and now I'm a this.
Mm-hmm.
And you took a workshop and now practice what you've learned,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and develop, because I think that these skill sets are developed through use. You know, the guides I work with have a very distinct way of speaking that I trust. I'm not just listening to whatever wants to start chatting to me. I think that that's a little risky to do,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to be sort of navigating, you know, the inner planes and saying, who wants to talk today? You know, I don't want Jack the Ripper coming through me. I have no desire for that. I'd rather have a really good teacher who knows his subject or its subject. You know, that's how I feel. But that's me, and everybody learns in their own way.
Oh, look, absolutely. I just want to say something about you look like when you take on people's energy. I haven't actually seen you do that, but I
Mm-hmm.
was watching a comedian on some talk show, and I cannot remember his name. He's quite well known. He's American, and he was
Mm-hmm.
doing impersonations of different people, and he
Mm-hmm.
was doing that.
Yeah.
He would just kind of he didn't talk about doing that because he's just on mainstream and he's just
Mm-hmm.
he would like take on he'd just do someone's accent, you know, Jack Nicholson or Trump,
Yeah.
somebody, and he would look like
You would
them.
step
People
into them.
looking at him and
Jim
going,
Carrey can do that. I've seen him do
he
that.
can he
Um,
can. I have to say, not as well as this other one, and I can't, don't ask me what
yeah.
his name was, but I was thinking about you at the time I was
Uh,
watching that, thinking this must be what Paul does.
well, the difference is I do it with people that are, I work only with a living. I mean, people that have crossed, I can get them, but I get them as they were when they were living. So I'm not a
Yeah.
spiritual medium bringing in messages from the other side. But, you know, if you had issues with your mother, and your mother's on the other side, and you give me your mother's name, I may be able to step into her and become her within the dynamic that was expressed while you were together, you know,
Right.
and help.
Mm-hmm.
I do a lot of that work. Most of the people that I tune into are people that I've never ever met and never will meet. People come to a workshop and say, I'm estranged from my daughter,
Yeah,
or I'm having issues with my boss. And if somebody gives me the name, I use the name. It's kind of like psychometry, you know, you hold somebody's watch and you get the vibration. I just use the name, and I just step in, and I am them in that moment, and I have access to higher information. I always have to say I'm not a psychic spy. That's not what I'm doing, but I'm operating in some ways as a switchboard. But the only way that I can do that is to become the object. I have a wonderful friend, Laura Day, who's a good psychic. And she said, you know, what you're doing is mediumship, and mediumship is becoming the object of inquiry. And I went, yeah, that is what it's like. You become the object, you become the person. And I enjoy it because it can be proven out. You know, you can film me doing that. There was a TV show that used to be on, I think it's back, but in a different incarnation, on the Biography channel in the US called The Unexplained.
Oh,
And
right.
I was I was on that show for a bit. And they once filmed me reading for a woman who they just told me she had issues with her son.
Right.
And I didn't know anything else. She was a lovely woman. And I tuned into her son, and I started, my fingers clawed up. I started rocking back and forth. I lost my hearing. And the kid just kept saying, get me out of here, get me out of my body, basically. And I didn't know what the hell was going on. I thought, is this a psychotic kid? And then I lost my hearing, and I said, is he deaf? And she said, I don't know. And I'm going, what the hell is this craziness? But they intercut the footage of me reading with the actual boy who had cerebral palsy and had never spoken in his life. And what I was doing was carrying all the symptoms. I mean, it was a radical experience and a radical reading. It wasn't a joyful reading because you understood. And she actually didn't know that her son was as aware as he was.
Right.
And that was a gift for her because she was, he was getting heavy and she was having to carry him around the house and take care of all of his needs. But that kind of stuff I'm really interested in. I don't know how it works. I don't know if it's mirror neurons, but it's pretty consistent. So there's a kind of physical mediumship that I employ when I work. I'm told, and I haven't seen it, maybe it's on film somewhere, when I'm channeling, my eyes often turn bright blue. I have dark eyes, I have dark hazel eyes.
Do
And
you?
yeah, I do. Maybe they look green because of the
They
painting,
do.
but yeah, I don't have blue eyes. Maybe when I was tiny. So that's that, that's my experience of all that stuff.
Well, I can tell you, as someone who studied as a naturopath and a doctor and an
Uh-huh.
iridologist, blue, there's only two colored eyes. There's true brown and true blue.
Oh,
And
interesting.
then every other color that we see that looks green or hazel is pigment that is over the blue eye. So all babies are born
Huh.
either with true brown eyes or true blue eyes. And
Mhm.
then, like, my daughter had the most unbelievably sparkling bright blue eyes when she was born, and soon, a few months after, they started to get this yellow pigment which turned them
Mm.
green.
Uh-huh.
And all that pigment is actually um, sort of toxins, really,
Huh.
and
Oh,
that
interesting.
represent, it might be karmic stuff, it might be physical stuff, because you don't display illness necessarily if you've got a lot of like if you've got hazel eyes. But
Mhm.
just that you say that when you channel, they go bright blue, it's kind of like the toxins are removed.
I don't know what it is. I find it interesting to hear it. I'll
Yeah.
often ask people, the guides do this thing in workshops sometimes where they stand in front of people and they sort of see them. And I'll often ask what color my eyes were, and people will say blue, blue. And then I'll say, or actually the first row might say hazel or green, like the first four people. But as the energy increases, as I do this, they get bluer and bluer and bluer. It's just the
Yeah,
amount of, and I'm fascinated by it. I don't know how it happens, but
I'm fascinated too.
yeah, it's curious to me. But I like the physical stuff because and when I work in the energy that's there for people that they can then work with, because the books are all attunements, so people, are not reliant on me. They can work with the energy of the guides. That's the whole purpose of them. That stuff I like because if you can feel it, if you can have your own experience with it, you can trust your own information. And I'd much rather people trust their own information and defer to mine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's really important with every message.
Hmm.
Everyone that you listen to, you've got to tune in with your own mob,
Yeah.
your own. Okay, look, so let's get into these. There's a couple of questions I've written down here. With all
Hmm.
the books, how do you feel that they differ from book to book?
Well, they do. The first book, I Am the Word, which was channeled in 2009 and published in 2010, in some ways, I think holds the DNA of all the books that follow. I think what they've been doing in the subsequent books is really unpacking that teaching. But the concepts, as they're teaching it, become more and more radical and more experiential because it's about being at a certain level. It's not a theoretical teaching, it's a teaching of actualization or realization.
Mm-hmm.
And they seem to build methodically, actually. The first six books are all, I think, in preparation for the series that they're delivering now, which they're saying is they're taking us to the upper room, which is the level of, vibration or a chord or the octave above the one that we've been accustomed to.
Mm-hmm.
And the process of aligning at that level has been laid in the prior books and through the claims and attunements that they brought through. And now they're teaching the upper room. Realization, the new one, is where they introduce that teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that's coming out in August, which is the 8th book, Alchemy, is really about learning how to maintain that vibration. And it's a challenging teaching, but it's
Oh
a thick,
yes.
yeah.
This is where I am. Like, this is the
Mhm.
questions that I get. This is
Yeah.
like, how do you maintain? So I can get in meditation, I can contact that, I
Hmm.
can reach it. But how do I maintain that as a human in my daily life? Um, Yes, this is the questions that
Yeah.
people ask me about. So that's beautiful. Oh, that's beautiful. Another question a lot of people ask, there's just so much synchronicity happening this morning.
Hmm.
I was on
Hmm.
Facebook, a million people doing stuff on Facebook, and I had posted an article I'd written ages ago about born knowing. It was about born knowing. When you're a baby, you're born knowing
Yeah.
everything, and then you tend to forget, and then you get conditioned. And then someone had written, I still don't know why I'm here. And so as I'm listening, and this is a question I get a lot from people, like, why am I here? How do I serve? And so as I'm listening, reading the book today, I know how I serve is
Hmm.
very big inside the book realization.
Hmm.
I know how I serve. So that's the kind of the crux of that book, right? Like knowing how you serve. And so then the next book will be living it, like knowing it and living it, two different things, right?
Well, they're talking, you see, they're yes and no.
Yes and no.
The claim I know how I serve was first brought through in the third book, which was the book of knowing and worth. And the attunement, I know who I am, I know what I am, I know how I serve, which they've also been unpacking. And they are unpacking, I know how I serve in realization. What the guides have said is that how one serves is how one is most fully expressed as the true self, which is, it's a vibratory act. It's the act of being at a level of vibration and consciousness. And then what you do from that place, if in fact you're called to act, will be in a level of alignment. You know, at least in the US and culturally, people assume that how they serve is what they do. I'm going to be a nurse, I'm going to be a Reiki master, I'm going to open up a studio. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things, but that's an externalized way of being in service. And we tend to equate that culturally with career. And I don't think it has a damn thing to do with career. I often tell this story, so, forgive me for if you've heard it before. But, I'm here in Maui because my friend Brent, invited me here. He's here with his kids, and said there's a house nearby, come stay. And Brent's great. He's like 6'3" and he's a big, like Rock Hudson-y, big, guy. And I tuned into Brent once for a mutual friend. And Brent showed up walking down a country road at night going, what am I here for? What am I here for? What am I here for?
Mm.
And then there was this big tree that had fallen across the path. And because Brent is tall and strong, he was able to pick up the tree, toss it off the side of the road, and then went back to saying, what am I here for? What am I here for? What am I here for? And the teaching was he was there to move the damn tree that had fallen in front of the path. And in doing that, he opened up the path for everybody coming behind him, but he was looking for the big thing, that would sound like the big career move, the big objective.
Yes.
And I hear, the lesson of the day is the teaching of the day. It's all in the day, but how we serve is our true expression. And the guides say if you begin to work with it at that level, because they say the true self knows and the small self thinks, if you go to the true self who knows and you start working with the claim, I know how I serve, the guides say, the days of figuring it out are over. Then it
Thank you.
becomes about moving into accord.
Moving into accord. Thank you. That's so beautiful. I had a client who I've known for years, who's been serving for years.
Mm-hmm.
He has a business. He started it as a spiritual venture and couldn't get any customers, so he turned it into a mainstream venture. And his heart's not singing because
Yeah.
it's just like it's just the operation of it. And it's been 20 years, and he's like asking me, "What am I here to do?"
Mm-hmm.
And my guides did not tell him what he was here to do. So
Yeah.
after 2 hours of helping him release some limiting thought forms and forgiveness of his parents and talking to his dead parents, so much happened in that 2 hours, right? He
Yeah.
still said at the end of it, well, I didn't get the answer to my quest.
Yeah. I get it.
And I'm like, what?
I once read for this guy, this is years ago, I don't think he'd mind me saying this. He was a successful attorney. He came into my office, and he was sad, and he wanted to know what he needed to do. And I tuned into him and I said to him, you're not going to want to hear this because I'm seeing you tending bar. And he looked at me and he looked so wistful and he said, the happiest time of my life was the summer after college when I was tending bar. but it wasn't good enough. It wasn't what one was expected to do. Do you understand that? And I think we get stuck in these things. The guides often say, you know, when people are asking this question, what would you do with your time if you could do anything? If you weren't worried about the paycheck or the insurance or what your parents thought of you, or, you know, how you were going to support the family, what would you choose? Because somebody's getting paid to do that somewhere. Somebody's getting paid to read books all day, or watch TV, or run, or sit at the beach. But very often it's something different. I would be doing this work that I'm doing now, as I used to, when people put $10 in a basket in my apartment and we had 4 people, you know, and that was, you know, a couple of pizzas or something, you know, that was what it was.
Yeah.
But I was so curious, and I knew that I didn't want to stop. You know, before that, I was a writer who didn't want to write. I was a playwright who just didn't want to do it. I could find every reason not to. And now, and I had terrible writer's block, and now they deliver whole books that don't need editing. It's the craziest thing in the world. Talk about a good deal. I'm very fortunate. That's why there's so many books. They take 30 days each, really, of dictation. You know, sometimes spread out over a couple of months, but that's it. There's no struggle there.
Again, I'm going to say, be careful what you ask for. It's like I'm a writer that doesn't write. I want to write, but I don't want to write.
Yeah.
There was something else I wanted to say to you then. I've gone blank. It's going to come back in a minute. I don't know, I've gone blank. All right, let me get into these questions. There she is. So going back to how do I serve? So again, I'm reminded of Mother Teresa, who said it's not the great things you do, it's the things that you do. It's the small things you do with great love. I think there was just, you know, tending bar with great love, or just that. It doesn't matter what you do, it's just do it with great love. I think we get so caught up. And really in the book, Realization, there was a part I was listening to this morning that goes into, you know, as humans, we're sort of always thinking about, you know, the success and career and how we're going to be famous and how we're going to make lots of money. And we get so caught up in that story, we forget that it's not about that story. What have I got here? Okay, so this is from Unette. The shift is happening, she says. I wanted to talk to you about that too, but I'll get to that later. What can we do to support it? She's got a few questions here. How can we accelerate the process as light workers or light weavers? What do the guides want us to know about the global village? Well, let's just talk about those 2 questions. I've got a few questions here. What can we do to support the shift, and how can we accelerate the processes as people who are bringers of the lighthouses, bringers of the dawn?
You know, I mean, this is really questions for them. I don't have the answers to this, truthfully. I mean, I'll see if I can tune in. I hear you believe the process needs to be accelerated, or it already is. Can you keep up with it? Can you keep up with it? That's the question. That's the real question. And are you willing to disarm the self who believes herself to be in jeopardy, who believes herself to be in jeopardy, who must control everything, who must control everything to stay safe in order to stay safe? When you know who you are, you know your safety, you know your safety, to become the light, and you become the light that supports others, that supports others in their recognition of their true being, period. And they're saying period. So what was the first question?
Well, you've answered it. What can we do to support it? And the acceleration, it's already being accelerated. They're saying, how can we accelerate the process? It's already accelerated. What do the guides want us to know about the global village? I don't know what she means by that. Maybe the guides
I don't either. No, I mean, I perhaps she's talking about unity. I find it curious sometimes that sort of phrases that make it into the zeitgeist are assumed to be understood. You know, when people sometimes come and say, well, what do the guides have to say about our soul contracts? I say, well, that's Carolyn Mace's work. Guides don't talk about soul contracts. They talk about agreements we make prior to incarnation, and they'll talk about that. But it's not like everybody's, you know, read Louise Hay on the other side, you know. I mean, she's speaking in her own jargon, you know, which is perfect for her, and I'm happy about it. I'll ask about global village unified culture. They're saying unified culture is not a healthy thing, is not a healthy thing. Culture may be distinct. Culture may be distinct as long as you comprehend it, as long as you comprehend that each individual is a plurality, is of plurality of the whole. To comprehend individuals through tribalism is not necessarily healthy either, is not necessarily healthy either, unless you understand that all tribes are one, unless you understand that all tribes are one. Some choose to eat fish, some choose to eat fish, some choose to eat grass, some choose to eat grass, some pray to this or that, some pray to this or that. But unification is simply comprehension, is simply the comprehension that it must be one, that you must be one, you must be one, because you cannot be other than that, because you cannot be other than that. Tell this, say this. So the example they use about this is almost, they talk about like snowflakes and raindrops. Each individual raindrop is of the storm. Mm-hmm. It comprehends itself both as singular and of the plural. Mm-hmm. You understand? Mm-hmm. And when the rain hits the pavement or hits the earth, it becomes one again. It goes back into that sense of collective. So global village isn't a phrase I've ever heard them use. So I guess that's how they'll address it.
Kathy wants to know, what are some of the positive things we can look forward to that will result from what's happening now? I won't give it a name.
I hear it's up to you. It's great opportunity. How do you wish to take it? How do you wish to take it? I mean, the guides have been talking about this for a few years. I mean, really a long time.
Talking about this as in what's happening now?
Yeah. I mean, they haven't. It's actually, somebody posted an excerpt from an interview I must have given last year, where the guide said what's about to come is going to be different than anything that you can expect. It's going to impact every structure, Mm-hmm. But they don't teach gloom and doom. They do teach our responsibility to our own creations. Mm-hmm. If, we've made, we want to blame the banks, but we invest in the banks.
Yep.
We want to vilify these people, but we're party to them.
Absolutely.
The guides say you can't lift the evil man to the upper room because you have made him evil.
Okay, so just before we got on, I posted this on my Facebook page because I was just like, oh my God, this is so profound. I just got to find it. And it was from the book. And there'll be a million questions after it. Just because it also spoke synchronicity to what somebody had posted, saying that for those virus deniers, if you deny the virus, I'm going to unfriend you straight away because you're stupid, like damning people that had a different point of view. And he's a friend of mine, and I said, that's a sort of strong stance to make, to damn somebody for a different point of view. Can't we all live in the world with different points of view? And then I read this synchronicity. What you damn damns you back. What you curse is your own curse reflected right back at you. Humanity itself is accountable for its actions, as is the individual, as is the culture, a community, a country, a world. At this time, there is a reckoning of great magnitude, and the injustice you see in your world is making itself known for only one purpose: to be reknown, reclaimed, and made new. Behold, I make all things new, saith the Christ, and it is still so, and will always be true. And when you claim it upon what you see, the vibratory field you hold now is its encounter with what you would call darkness, seeks to lift and can only lift as the one who knows who he claims the lifting. The frightened man operates in fear for himself or the well-being of others, which is what I heard my friend saying. He fears for the well-being of others, and so he's damning people. So he's coming from a beautiful heart, but he's still damning people.
I get it.
Yeah.
Was that book from Realization? Was that quote from Realization? That's from
Realization. Yeah.
That's funny. I don't remember that one, but I mean, they've been talking about what's coming for some time, and they say everything, everything will be made new. That's how they teach it. And behold, I make all things new is the teaching that they're bringing through now. It must have been the first time they ever claimed it was in that book, because it's its own attunement, and it's quite powerful when you begin to work with it. I'm challenged by this. I'm a New Yorker. I have friends who have died. I know people that have died, and I have friends that are sick and are recovering now, and I'm not living at home. I'm living elsewhere because I'm in my 50s, I'm overweight, I have high blood pressure. I'm not the person who should be, licking counters right now. And I really do take exception, if somebody thinks it's okay that they can be contagious and not take responsibility for it. I'm also somebody who survived the AIDS epidemic when I was in my 20s, and I had many, too many friends to even count die, from college, from graduate school, from where I worked. And I've lived through this before. And, responsibility in those days became safe sex, wear a condom, It's pretty basic stuff. And you do that to protect yourself and the other person. If you don't know, and in those days, nobody knew their status, straight or gay. Nobody even knew how it was transmitted. So it was terrifying for people. So I come having been through that and have my own PTSD still from those years, where people that were 25 years old who I had, gone to writing class with at NYU were dying, right in front of me. And it was not a pretty death. It was a horrible, horrible thing.
Well, I have to say, Sydney, huge gay community, was hit hard during the AIDS epidemic. And I worked in a creative industry then. I was working as an artist, painting mannequins' faces and doing stuff like that. They were dropping like flies around me as well. And I'm fat and 50 and probably vulnerable too, but I am in the thick of it here in Sydney. Yeah. I have to say, our statistics are nothing like America. But I'm not afraid. And I'm not afraid because, I understand that everything is a collective manifestation. It's a manifestation of thought. And what am I going to manifest? So this is a question I was going to pose you and the guides. Can't remember, I wrote it down. A collective manifestation of even the virus and the pandemic. It is a collective manifestation.
I agree.
How are we as a collective doing this? And how can we as a singular or small group shift this global manifestation?
I hear by being accountable to your own actions, each person knowing the worth of each person, whether or not you differ from them in opinion or belief. Everybody has the right to live. Prudence is required. Prudence is required. Prudence is not fear. Prudence is not fear. Prudence is awareness. Prudence is awareness of a risk and the choice not to take it, and the choice not to take it if you wish to take the risk. If you wish to take the risk, take it for the self, but not for those around you, to infringe on an individual free will. To infringe on an individual's free will is possible, but it's also a choice you'll pay for, but it's also a choice you will pay for, and that is not retaliation, and that is not retaliation as the law of karma and cause and effect. That is the law of karma and cause and effect. To become aware of your participation in the whole, beyond your small self's need to be secure, or protected by his own ideas, or protected by his own ideas, whatever they may be, moves you to a level of comprehension. When unity is claimed, this will release, period. Well, that's interesting. Say this. One of the very first things, I'm sorry, go on. Nope, you go.
I was going to say, that's interesting. What I'm hearing is just allowing people to have their beliefs.
Yeah.
And don't try and change them because they're believing it and they're creating an experience through that belief, and that experience is serving them in some way. And then that speaks to everyone that's trying to change everybody's mind because they have different beliefs, right? So there's so much of that happening at the moment. There's so many theories coming out of what's happening, why it's happening.
I agree.
And the 5G thing is really big where I am. It's like, spread this, tell everybody this. And so I hear the guide saying, if you want to be in fear, let people be in fear. Don't try and change them. It's serving them in some way. That's what I'm hearing.
I guess so. I mean, the only thing, because I was in Costa Rica channeling on this the whole time, it was coming down.
Yeah.
And there are some of those, I think, lectures are up on YouTube, I think. We just put them up there. The guides, they've never chimed in on conspiracy theories ever. I don't know that they ever will. I'm curious about things, but it's not necessarily where I go either. And because my job is to stay clear enough, it's not to promote a personal agenda or not. I think personally that, when they teach this, they've said, listen, if you go to the beach and there are sharks in the water, best not to swim. It's that simple. They said that's not fear. That's prudence and caution. Best not to swim. That's how I understand it. And that's how I try to live. So I'm not frightened of this thing either. I'm just being prudent and cautious.
Yeah, I get it. But I have to say, my daughter is out. She's out with a group of people on a catamaran sailing up and down the Australian coast. They call it escape into isolation. So her house burnt down during the fires, and she went. She doesn't want to say she lives with mum, like she doesn't want to tell, but she's got a room here. But she sort of started living on this boat, and they escaped, and they are literally swimming with sharks. Like she's one of these fearless things, but she loves sharks.
That's fine then. I'm not going to knock it. I don't love sharks.
Yes,
I really don't.
That's the difference. That's the difference.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, I'm going to get more into that. Okay, Angela has a question. She's done your courses. She's been fan. How are you able to allow the guides to use you so freely when at times it seems like you have such resistance to the information coming forth? Does that resistance not lower your vibration? And with that resistance, how do you develop that initial trust in the guides from the start? Yeah, because Angela's channeling now too. So,
well, frankly, I'll be honest with you. If the information that was coming through was all convenient to Paul's level of consciousness, it probably wouldn't be terribly interesting or challenging. So I am challenged by it. I mean, when the guides start saying, well, there's no such thing as time, I go, okay, right. Well, this is a 2-hour class. And we're going to end in 2 hours. There is time. But then they explain, so I'll interrupt and then they will explain. And I'm actually very grateful that when I interrupt, and now they say, Paul has a question, and then they'll take the question. They got to a point in the books, which I appreciated, when I was about to ask a question and I didn't even form it because I'm like taking dictation, the question's forming back there, and they would anticipate the question and answer it before I could speak it. And the good news about that was it allowed them to continue their dictation as they wanted it. And there was one book, which was Book of Knowing and Worth, where I got derailed. It happened in a couple of books where I got derailed during the channeling and thought, okay, this is all got to go out the window. Now, the rule is I don't get to change anything in the books. So if they were to say the moon is made of green cheese, and I go, wait a minute, that's not true, they're going to have to come through and explain themselves because it's going to be in the book. I don't get to cut the inconvenient answer. I've met people who channel and they say, well, we just take out the negativity. And I go, then that's not channeling. It's not yours to take out. I'm really sorry. That's your book then. It's not your guide's teaching. If you want to pretty it up and package it to make it commercial, then call it what it is. It's a spiritual teaching, but maybe inspired. So I have to live with this. It's part of my work and part of my growth. And this is also part of the way that I can show up authentically for what this stuff is. Because I'm the one that said we can't change anything. I said it to my first publisher, and my current publisher is of the same feeling. Yes, that's the right way to do this.
That was kind of your rule, though. Like they didn't say
don't
change anything. You said I will do this, and I won't change. You've made that your own rule.
My sense is it's an agreement that
it's an agreement,
because they understand it. And there are lectures that they've given when I've been in book dictation that I've not been comfortable with. And they've said, well, Paul, this is not in the book. This is just for the students in the room. Okay. And then the next morning they may come back and do one for the book. But channeling a book, because the last 3 books, I think, were done entirely in front of live audiences. I mean, every section was done publicly and videotaped. The good news about that is that there is a witness. The bad news is I'm on pins and needles because I don't know what to expect. And the book that's coming out next, I was in a rough space through the entirety of the book. The morning that they began the first lecture for the book, I found out an hour before that an old friend of mine from my academic life had taken his own life. And I was stunned and devastated. And I walked into the classroom to channel. I was at Esalen, and the guides began in the book. And I couldn't believe it because I was in no shape whatsoever. And the entire book was delivered through these sort of circumstances that completely put me in a place of, I don't care what comes out of my mouth. I have to show up. I've agreed to show up, and I will. And I think it's actually one of the best books that they've delivered. I didn't know that till I read it through. So why am I telling you all this? It's because, I guess, the immediacy of the transmission is important to me, and the integrity of the transmission is important to me. And people, I don't think the books are terrible. I think they're much more readable than they used to be. Mm-hmm. But people forget that these are spoken texts. There's no writing, you know. And if you think about somebody telling you a story and then having that story typed up and printed in a book, that's what this whole thing is, start to finish. Yeah. There's no writing, going back and cleaning up a clumsy sentence. And fortunately, the guides, I think, are good at how they do this. You know, you can't tell very often when you're reading the book that it was a spoken text that's been transcribed.
No, I think you've answered the question, but I'm just going to reiterate this, because I think that where Angela is she's saying that, you know, how can you be of a high vibration to receive the information if you're in resistance? And what I'm hearing from you is that agreement was settled before you even came into incarnation. And so regardless of your upset or your resistance, the guides, having as a soul, for a better word, agreed, move you aside to bring through the work. So that's an agreement that was set up, and it's not something that you've had to practice. Like, you don't have to come into channeling and then raise your vibe in order to channel.
I just show up.
You just, they kind of move you. Okay, with Paul and all his upset and all his resistance, we're just going to move that aside and then come through.
Yeah, I mean, literally, I could go from this conversation and 2 minutes, I just did my little prayer of protection, imagined myself climbing into the back seat of the car, and they could talk to you for 45 minutes more about whatever they wanted. Yeah. And I'm used to that. But I did want to address something about this. You know, I have a good friend who's an old-time medium, and she does teach people how to develop. And I asked her, and she said, you know, you're part of this group that your guides are. You're actually of them. Yeah. And she said, I happen to know this because they wouldn't put up with you interrupting them if you weren't. They just wouldn't put up with it. And they're doing this with you because, you know, and I often, I feel like I'm this guy sitting in the very first row in front of the teacher going, hey, wait a minute. But I don't think that that's resistance or low vibration. I think it's asking to become more clear. And it's because I'm not denying what they're saying. I'm asking for a rationale or an unpacking of the teaching. And part of the reason I do this, and this may actually help Angela's question, is a part of me does feel responsible or accountable, not to the content of the book, but, you know, there's 7 books out now that have my name on the cover that I have not written, but my name is on the cover. And at that level, I feel a level of responsibility to, if I think, you know, if the guides were to say to me something that I thought was nuts or fear-based, I would want to question it. You know, I would say, well, why are you saying this? Or what is this really about? And without it, once in a while, they'll say, we'll answer this later. We wish to continue. And I'm actually happy when they do that because it means they're much more in charge. But I don't think that they've ever ignored the questions. And I've been told by a lot of readers that the questions that I ask are also their questions. Yeah. And it helps them sort of have a better experience of the book.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm going to move on. I could say more to that, but this is another great question. What has been your greatest learning experience since working with the guides? What has been your greatest joy? I don't know if that's still from Angela. I can't remember, but anyway.
I don't know how to answer that now, today, in the middle of all this. I'm living a completely different life than I thought I would. I'm doing work that I didn't even think was possible. I've had to let go of enormous ideas about myself and who I was supposed to be. Yes. None of that was comfortable and easy for me, truthfully. Just like everybody else, I have an investment in the mask. You know, even when the mask grows painful and uncomfortable, I'm frightened to be without it. Right. And I'm still in this process. The process I'm in now, and I feel this, and the guides use this example, this illustration in a class they taught a few months ago at Esalen. And they said, it's kind of like you're all being turned upside down and being up in the upper room and shaken by your feet, and all those little black pebbles in your pockets, those little fears that you've accrued are being released, but they're being shaken out of you. And the reason is you can't keep them in your pocket at that level of vibration, because as you do that, you're still attracting from them, and that's what brings you back to the lower floor. That's what brings you back to the low vibrational, fear-based self that you've been used to. The greatest joys, I suppose the greatest joy is that I get to have an ongoing experience of wonder. And at times I'm so familiar with that it's not the mind-blowing experience that it's been. But I can't say, I'm not somebody, I was an unhappy kid. I was a brooding, worried, chubby kid, and I turned into a brooding, chubby, cranky, older man in some ways.
Well, I got to say, you're less cranky now than you were 5 years ago.
I am. I totally agree. No, I remember that interview, and it wasn't you. I know what was going on at that time of my life. I was really being
pushed.
I was being pushed, and I was going, hey, wait a minute, because talk about taking the leap into the unknown. People often don't leave jobs that are seemingly secure that they've had for a quarter of a century and love, and I chose to do it. Nobody asked me to leave. Perhaps if I'd stayed another year, I would have gotten fired. Who knows? But, it was a place I felt safe and comfortable. I'm not terribly comfortable being visible in this work. That's my least favorite part of it. I'm shy. I'm okay here one-on-one, but invite me to a party, I'll be in the corner of the room,
Look, I hear you. Look, I'm on media, but I am shy too. It took me 10 years to put my knob on the camera. I went behind, I was asked to spread more, to expand the work. And so I went on radio because I could sit there in my slippers and no one could see me and I could just talk. And then they said, get on YouTube. And I'm like, no. Anyway, but can I get personal with you?
Yeah. So
just going back to going up to the upper room and having the black pebbles shaken up, so as somebody who has been single for 10 years, that's me, do you think one of those pebbles as humans is that desire to sort of be in that romantic relationship, and in the upper room it's not necessary because we're all just swimming in love and we don't really need that?
Yeah.
What do you think about all that?
Well, they answered something like this in a live stream recently, and they said, well, the world becomes your lover at this level. That's the difference.
Yes.
And, the idea that I tend to think I must be lacking in something because I'm not in, a partnership with somebody that I love. And I say I want that, and I say I would enjoy that, but there's probably a good reason I'm not. Right. And I suspect that if that's something that I will benefit from and can choose and can experience and can allow, it will be there, and I have a part in that. But I don't know that these things, I have these things too, I'm heavy, and I have this virus thing and being in lockdown for a month and a half with my friend is shopping for me because I don't even drive at Costco. I'm coming back with these trays of food in my freezer. I'm going, oh, this is like my worst nightmare and my wildest dream all at the same time. But I go, I should be, I should look like my friend Aubrey Marcus, who's, a muscle guy, and I should.
I should. Too.
But I'm not. And does this negate who I am? Maybe for somebody, or what I teach, maybe for somebody. But I'm also some guy that for years used to channel and then smoke a cigarette out the window and then come back. So I've come a long way in terms of my self-healing. But I don't know. I'm going to ask for you, actually, about the relationship, if that's okay.
Okay.
You say you're allowed to have it and you're not ready for it. But you almost say that as if you've got a secret. As if to say, when I'm ready, I'll do it. But you see, I think that this would be done your way. And I have to say, not through anybody's idea of who you should be or what it should look like. You're really done with that. This is going to be my person, my choice. And like you put the world up on warning with this. So there's a little bit, this is actually very good. So I actually think you may find yourself in one if you want it. Because you look at me like, like you look at me like I know what I'm doing. Don't
No,
think
I'm
I
looking
don't.
at you like
I was telling you what it felt like. Yeah, go on.
I've kind of resigned to that I might just, that this is it, and then
Yeah.
that my work in this world is much more important than my personal desires, and that love doesn't come from the lover. Love comes from being in love with everyone. That's where I
Yep.
go. And then the personality me says, actually, the personality me doesn't torture me as much anymore. She did probably for the first 5 years, wanting that relationship and
Yeah.
not seeing anybody that I wanted to be with. And
Yeah.
then another 5 years passes and still not finding anyone that I'd want to be with, and think, well, maybe I just have to resign myself to that. Just being in love with the world is what this experience is, and that's fine. That's
I hear wait
beautiful.
and see. So that's what I'm just going to tell you. That's
Okay.
what I get when I tune in. I mean, I don't get it for myself either. And I'm in a similar
Okay.
boat. And I'm more comfortable with my own company now than I think I've ever been. And I have to say, this odd, I was in a 2-week self-quarantine here on Maui when I arrived. And I was living in a tiny house. It was like a little gypsy caravan, it's astonishing, with a little hot plate,
Cool.
and I actually loved it. I didn't have anything that I was used to, and I was becoming self-sufficient emotionally in a way that I don't know that I've really had to think about.
Yeah.
And I was so displaced that I had nothing, I had to accept that. So I've been using this time oddly for my own well-being and learning. But I don't know that I need what I thought I needed. And that's what I learned in that tiny house. I don't need it.
Right.
What I do miss at times is good companionship, and warmth. Those are the things, I've been wanting to go back to New York today and yesterday. I was like, oh, it's time. I want to go back to New York anyway. It's time. And things are improving there. But my dog is there, and I
Yeah.
miss my dog, and I miss
Yeah.
the familiarity of things. But do I need to go back? No, I don't think I do. I don't. Do I need a partner? I don't know that I do. I would welcome one, truthfully. But I will say this, who I would attract now would not be who I would have attracted 2 to 5 years ago or 10 years ago, God knows. When I look at my last long-term relationship, I would never do that again. I learned from it. I'm glad I was in it. I don't have any bad feelings, but that's not an experience I would choose to replicate.
I'm hearing you.
Self-worth is in a very different place than it was
I feel
back
like
in those days.
a relationship would so interrupt the work too, because it's so time consuming being in a relationship. But anyway, I'll get off this question. There's a few more. How are you going? Are you all right? There's a couple
We're
more.
okay.
We're okay. Okay, what has been, I've asked that question. In addition to living out the teachings of the guides, are there any particular ways we can help children learn, embrace, and generally not forget what they inherently know from a divine perspective? Do the guides have any children's material planned?
I hear love them as they are. I hear children have to choose this when they're ready, and their choice is heard, and their choice is heard. But in the meantime, love them as they are, love them as they are. Don't try to mold them into what you want. Protect them as you can. Protect them as you can. Love their wisdom. Love their wisdom. It's often higher than what you think. It's often higher than what you think, and show them who they are by loving them, and show them who they are by loving them, not by telling them should be, not by telling them who they should be, period. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. All right, there's a question I think you've answered. What do you have any regrets since beginning the work? I think we've covered that. General comment, I have grown so much since I began studying the work. It has truly been transformative for me. I'm going to cry again, from the vibrational level to manifestation. Thank you for your willingness to be the vessel that brings this material forward. Thank you to the guides for the material. The world is a better place for it. Oh, I think that's from Angela. I haven't written the name down. For the guides, if this time expounds on the idea of embodying the divine self, does this mean that one eventually gets to point in which the small self diminishes. Now, what is she
Yes.
saying here? Does this
Oh,
mean that one eventually gets to a point in which the small self diminishes, or is it simply that we are no longer ruled by the small self? We're
I
less
hear both are
reactive, she
true.
says.
Both are true. Both are true. Say this, yes. What I've heard from the guides is that the true self assumes the small self. It
Right.
appropriates it, and they talk about that as really, there's different words they use. One of them has been resurrection, the resurrected self, and they talk about the will sort of aligning to the personal will aligning to the higher, and that the higher, which is in higher vibration, sort of supports the unification of the will. But I don't think it's ever been the teaching that we stop being who we are. We become who we truly are. And, they've said things like, the personality self has its place. I mean, they're not, denying, or I guess people would call it the ego. They call it the personality self or the
Yeah.
mask. They are saying that the masks are releasing, the costumes are releasing, and that's part of the challenge that we're going through. They're saying to say this, one of the first things I ever heard in Channel, I'm 99% sure I heard it and didn't read it someplace because I wrote it down and stuck it in a book. And I was struggling. I was again in my early 30s. And what I heard was freedom will come when the throne relinquishes its king. And I thought, what the hell does that mean? But that's the essence of the teaching, which is who sits in the throne? Is it the personality self? And my personality self is either frightened or angry or wants to know what people think of him and, wants to control outcome, or the true self who just knows and could care less, about those things. And I understand that as the teachings, finally, of the books. Who sits in the throne? The guides say the small self rules a small kingdom. And the guides teach the kingdom, or the true kingdom, as the realization of the inherent divine that's in all things.
Oh, okay. Well, I just have to repeat that. The small self rules the small kingdom.
Yeah.
And the divine self, say that again, and the divine
I don't know
self.
how I said it. The divine self, knows itself in consort with the kingdom of all, which
All
is the divine.
things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So the kingdom, they say, is the realization of the inherent divine that is
In
all
everything.
things. Yeah, that's when you live in the kingdom, you're living in union with source
And
and that
then
awareness.
you can kind of get out of this notion of celebrity in the world of men, and you can kind of expand out into the all things being the universe and the cosmos
Mm-hmm.
and the multidimensional realities, and you can sort of talk about ETs and other dimensions, all things, not
Yeah,
just Hollywood or money or, like all things. Yes.
exactly right. Yep, everything. The
Everything.
guides have said, even fear is of God, it just doesn't know it.
Yeah.
Fear's action is to deny the divine, and fear. And somebody once said, well, if all things are of God, what about fear? And they said, fear is of God too. It just doesn't know it.
Yeah.
And the reclaiming of things involves the reclaiming of fear, not
But you talked about
cauterizing it.
the small self or the personality self or the ego self. We've given many labels
Mm-hmm.
as the mask. And as you were talking,
Mm-hmm.
and you were saying wearing the mask, I was thinking of people that go to balls, or like I
Mm-hmm.
have a friend here, Jasper, who puts on big rave parties, and they're non-alcoholic, right? But he
Mm-hmm.
usually asks you to dress up, and he gives
Mm-hmm.
you a theme, and so it's fun to put on the mask. It's fun to dress
It's
up.
great, but that's what we incarnate with.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
going to show up in this lifetime as a, I don't know, pick something as a Republican accountant, with two abusive parents and an alcoholic wife. Wow. My friend Natalie Sudman, who wrote a wonderful book called The Application of Impossible Things, which is about
Well, Natalie and I had Natalie on the show a few years ago.
oh,
We became
great.
great friends. We spoke
Yeah.
about you. I think I
Uh,
introduced you to.
you
Anyway,
might have,
yeah,
but we're buddies now, so that
yeah.
worked if that was you. And but she talks about, about what happened to her when she got blown up in Iraq, and she came back saying, "Oh, maybe just give me one eye, maybe just like
Yes.
I'll learn through all these things
Yep.
because what we experience is so terrible here. We're actually seeing as opportunity, in a higher way to have
Absolutely.
the myriad of experiences that are available to us in form."
Yes, that was the thing that knocked me out about her book, is that experience of her in the higher realms,
Hmm.
laughing with her guides as she was experimenting with different disabilities that she would have
Yeah,
after the, that just blew me away. But it
me
also,
too.
like your books, it also reminded me, it took me back to that remembrance of this earth life is our play, is our masked ball, if you,
Yeah, it is.
it's,
I
and
agree.
that we're having fun with it, you know, like people do at Halloween, they
Yeah.
dress up as these ghouls and they have fun with it. And
Hmm.
yeah. Okay, a couple of last questions. Where are we? Where are we? I think this is the last one. Explain. Yep, that, yeah. The guides say only the ego or the law of self needs self-help. When
Hmm.
you are in the upper room or more your true nature, do you don't need self-help? Does this mean that you don't need to process our stressful thoughts when we are experiencing them? What do you what do we do when we hit a limiting thought or a
Hmm.
self-sabotaging or critical thought? Yeah, so they're asking,
Yeah.
like, so the guides say only the small self needs self-help. When you're in the upper room, you don't
Mhm.
need self-help. So when you are the small self in
Well, I don't know that that's what they say. I mean,
oh,
they've said that they don't write self-help books,
books,
and they say self-help is for the small self.
right,
And there's nothing wrong with self-help. That's just not what they're teaching, you
right.
know? So the difference, let me ask them, the difference is the level you wish to have the problem. The difference is the level that you wish to attend to the problem with, exactly right. So here's the illustration. In the upper room, there's no fear.
Hmm.
And so in the workshops that I conduct, or the guides conduct, they bring everybody to the upper room and they say, okay, now what are you afraid of? And nobody's afraid of anything. And it's this bizarre experience because we're so used to it.
Hmm.
Now, in the upper room, if you can maintain the upper room, you're not calling to yourself those things. However, if there's things you need to learn through fear, you'll go back down and learn them that way. I'm not exempt from fear at all, but I'm not frightened of some of the things that I used to be, or in the same way that I used to be. So I think, you can deal with a problem through, say, psychotherapy or through a 12-step program, and they're effective ways of working through a problem. And
Hmm.
I've benefited from both of them in my
Right.
time. Or you can benefit through alchemy, which is really sort of an energetic reknowing of self, where you're no longer self-identifying through or as the problem. And that's one of the big challenges, I have and we have. The guides say, we all have these frames that we're walking around, and the purpose of the frame is to fill itself with what it expects. So if my frame is, I will never be loved, I'm always calling that to me. So the
Hmm.
purpose then is to release the frame. There's different ways to do it, but it's very hard to do it when you think the frame is telling you the truth and that is who you are. The guides teach the true self. Now, the true self knows that that's not possible, that everybody is worthy of love. How could that not be true at that level? So
Hmm.
you go to that level to understand it, and then you can collapse the frame or the belief system. It's just a different way of attending to it.
Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Love it. Does connection to our higher mind or higher self just dissolve our limiting thoughts? Yes. Does the connection to our higher mind or higher self just dissolve our limiting habitual subconscious thoughts?
I
So
hear it.
everyone has a like
Yeah,
a program of habitual limiting thoughts that they've got from
yeah.
parents and school and media.
Mhm.
And so does just connecting, like in that moment of like having a limiting thought, like I'm too fat and anyone's never going to love me, which is a thought I go,
Mhm.
uh, do I just connect to the higher mind and like it just dissolves that?
Yes, it's true. They're saying yes, it's true, but it's not true. But I hear it's not magical thinking. If you have belief systems, if you have belief systems that you've attended to, and formed and created, and formed and created and adhere to, they are your creation. They are your creation. You have to release them, and you need to release them. It is not a magic wand. It is not a magic wand. If it was a magic wand, you would all be skinny. You would all be skinny the moment you decided you could be. The moment you decided you could be. There may be acts to take. There may be acts to take, actions to take, actions to take, choices to make. There may be choices to make, and you must release the need. And you must release the need, or the idea of self, or the idea of self that you are seeking to confirm, that you are seeking to confirm through what you've chosen to do, through what you've chosen to learn through.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, go on. I'll leave it there.
Well, I was just going to say last question, and then we'll let
Okay.
you go for a swim at the beach because it's
Yes.
afternoon in Maui there. So,
It
from
is.
Sarah, what can an individual do or be to contribute? How are we attracting outcomes? How can we help turn this? What's this? How can we help this from higher good? No, how is the crisis perfect? Where do I put my focus? That's about 600 questions right there. So let's
Yeah.
start with one. What can an individual do to contribute? I think we've covered that. How can we
hmm
affect outcomes?
hmm
I think she's talking
Well,
about the crisis we're going through. How is this
yeah.
crisis perfect? I think we've covered that.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just say this, if I may, and just because it's a general teaching. The guides say we are in accord with everything that we see. And people like to say, I created this, I created that, and or I didn't create the virus. And, well, I didn't create the virus, but I'm also in accord with this experience that we're all
Yes,
sharing, and they're collective agreements to learn. So I
yes,
didn't create the war in the Middle East, but I'm in accord with it. And the consciousness that I hold is informing everything that I see. And that goes to this idea of what you damns you back.
right,
And what you blesses you. And to see when the guides say who you put in darkness or what you put in darkness calls you to that darkness. And
right.
that's personal responsibility and nothing more. So, you can have an experience, I think, of anything at any level. It's not wishing things away or deciding that they don't exist. The guides would actually say, if you can see or know the presence of the divine in whatever you see is actually altered and changed by that knowing. That's vibrational accord. That's how things are lifted. So the one who lifts to the upper room has to be there. You can't lift something to the 10th floor from the basement. You have to
Right.
get there and then lift it to you. And this isn't done through strength of will, it's done through alignment. So
Absolutely.
the aspect of self that operates in the higher level by nature of presence is already lifting because that's the teaching of co-resonance. So I hope
Yes.
that makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense. Yeah, when you're in the upper room, you naturally lift other people to the upper room. Look, I met a friend recently at the beach. Beautiful girl. She works in the corporate world, but she's such
Mm-hmm.
a beautiful. She volunteers for all the events that we put on, and she's just there helping everyone all the time. But she emailed me afterwards, and she said we were talking about her back pain. I wasn't giving her a teaching or a
Mm-hmm.
healing. I was just telling her how worthy she is, how helpful she is. I was just reminding her of how beautiful she is, right? And she said,
Mm-hmm.
I've had this back pain for years. And when I got home after that talk or that walk with you,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a back pain,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and it's just that easy, right?
yeah,
You just,
yeah.
you just live in love and you just spread that and you kind of lifts people up to the upper
Mm,
room. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Paul Selig, it's been such a blessing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed this very much.
Yeah, it's
Thank you,
been
Karen.
beautiful. Enjoy Maui, and I really look forward to seeing you down under one day soon. Well,
Ah,
maybe not this year, maybe next year, when everything returns to, well, I don't think it'll ever be normal, but when we can get together again.
I look forward to it too. Thank you. Take care now. Bye bye.
Oh, what a beautiful conversation with the delicious Paul Selig. Oh, my nose was running all the way through that, so I kept muting myself as I had a bit of a sniff. But yeah, it's really odd when I get on these things. My nose just goes crazy. It's something to do with my third eye. I don't know what it is. Energy moves through it, and it just starts running. Energy running. Um, how beautiful. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that and that you all know what the upper room is. I should have asked him to actually explain exactly what the upper room is. Just being in your divine presence in that place where you have no fear, where you're in unconditional love, when you can see all things as unified, where you understand that this life that we live is the Leela, the play of the universe, and that you're participating in the play, but you're enjoying it and you're a part of it, but you are not it. You're not your body, you're not your emotions, you're not your thoughts, you're participating in the masquerade ball, if you like, dancing in the masquerade ball, and you can enjoy it, all of it, the good, the bad, the ugly, and not live in fear. That's the upper room, the divine self. And I have to say, I know, that's where a lot of ETs live. That's where they reside. That's how they live. They understand their divine nature as their true self, and that they are participating in some sort of experience that they cherish, but it's not who they are. It's just they're participating in it. And I think that when humanity reaches that stage, we can have more. We can live more as in a cosmic consciousness. Live together, communicating and living with them. I was having a walk with a friend yesterday on the beach, and we were discussing many things. Many things. He's beautiful, David. And we were talking about vibrations, because he keeps saying, I know I'm connected to the ETs, but I don't see them. I've never seen a craft. I've never seen an angel. I've never seen an apparition. I've never seen, expecting to have some experience through his 5 physical senses, And we were talking about vibration. We're looking out into the sky. I'll have to post the pictures. I took so many beautiful pictures yesterday on Facebook. Just the clouds. It was like nature was just singing to us yesterday. There were rainbows. There was this sunset. There were these pink clouds. It was just magnificent. So we're looking out to the clouds and seeing if we could see craft. And I said, my guides were saying to me that they exist in a different vibration. They exist in the upper room, right? And so it's a faster vibration. It's like equating it to a fan or a propeller on a plane. When the propeller is still or slow, you can easily see it through our apparatus of our eyes, our physical eyes. But when the propeller speeds up, it literally becomes invisible, and we can't perceive it through our eyes. So that's why we can't perceive many ETs, because they're vibrating at a different frequency. They're higher. It's faster. It's a faster frequency, and so our physical eyes can't perceive them. So in order for them to come into the awareness of something that we can perceive through our physical senses, they have to literally lower their vibration, the speed of their vibration. Same with dead people, same with angels, which is all possible. They can do that. But that's when we can perceive them. Or we have to lift our vibration, raise our vibration, and then we're more in accord, more a vibrational, in a similar vibration to them, and then we have access to them. We can perceive them better. So that's with your dead relatives too. If you want to chat to your dead relatives, or the guides, or the mob, or raising your vibration, which means letting go of some of your stressful, limiting thoughts. But it was really interesting, the conversation, the question that Angela asked about how can the guides come through when you're in resistance? And Paul goes into, a friend of his dies of suicide, and he's really, really upset. And then he goes and he starts teaching, and they come through really easily. And that was really interesting, that regardless of his vibration, he's made an agreement with them that would happen. And so in that case, he didn't need to raise his vibration. They just move him aside and come through. But that's an agreement that they've made before he even got to Earth, I'd say. That was fascinating. Wasn't that fascinating? I love Paul. And I love Natalie Sudman too. I have to get her back on the show. I haven't had her on for a couple of years. She came in a few times into the Inner Sanctum. She's a beautiful, she's a delight. We became instant friends. We did some swaps on each other. It was lovely. Oh, that was beautiful. I'm going to be floating in the upper room for the rest of the day. It's morning here in Sydney, Australia, and I'm on a bit of a high after that. It was nice to see Paul so joyful, jolly and jovial and laughing, and I think that's the first interview where I've seen him so jovial, and I think that, as I say, Maui it's helping him. So that was really lovely, really beautiful. I hope you all enjoyed that. I'm raving, aren't I? Anyway, who's coming up next? I don't know, somebody. Inner Sanctum, we have the most beautiful sound Hathor transmission, Jane Elworthy coming into the Inner Sanctum to speak her wisdom and do some sound healing. You know, I really miss the physical sessions that we do. I do a lot of sound. I go to a lot of sound healers here in Sydney and have sound activations. And I have to say that as beautiful as they are online, it's really much better when they're in the physical. There's a different, you know, it all depends on microphones and how you're listening to it, but there's a different resonance and vibration when it's in the physical. But it still does work on the computer, I have to say, because it is energy. that lives outside of time and space, and you can still acclimate to that energy. Even if you're not even hearing it that well, you can still tune into that energy and have that energy benefit you and your frequency in your body and all things. And she's just delightful. She's delightful. We had Kevin Briggs the other day, and he's just a delight as well. I don't know if you've seen the show with Kevin Briggs, but we had a few people online, and I invited my friend David online, and that we go for walks and chat. David's a delight. He's going to come on the show and share some of his lovely stories, because he's just a galactic being with so many amazing stories. Even though he doesn't see anything with his physical things, as he says, physical senses. But he was saying that he had a profound sort of experience during the inner sanctum with Kevin, that so many answers had been answered, and he felt completely comfortable in his skin after listening to Kevin's story, because Kevin is just this amazing galactic being who's come here to share his experiences. But up until a couple of years ago, he said that he was going to go to his grave and never tell the world, because they were so extraordinary, and he just figured the world doesn't get it, and that's fine. I can live a happy life and not tell people what I experienced. Anyway, watch the shows I did with Kevin. I'll upload the highlights, or some of the highlights, soon, when I get around to editing out some of the highlights. And yes, we are in extraordinary times, and how you view it is your choice. No judgment. You can view it as a tragedy, as a crisis, as a drama, or you can view it as an incredible acceleration of opportunity, an acceleration on your spiritual path, on your spiritual growth, to really start to live what you have been reading or listened to on the shows, to really start to become, as to use Paul's words or the guide's words, to come into accord with the vibration of what you know to be true, or what you understand to be true, and really start to live it, which means not getting too caught up in stressful thoughts. Love you all. See you again soon. Bye for now.